everybody. My name is Superfizz. I am a dude from the ETHStaker community. We are a kind of an open group who works to support anyone who is interested in staking on the ETH2 network, whether that's solo staking or pool staking, whatever your interest. The ETHStaker crew is here to help you out. Today, this is community call 16, I believe, and we are here with I say this frequently. I say some of our favorite people, but I think that's because I like so many people in this space. But we're here with Ben Edgington and Adrian Sutton from Teku. Before I introduce them, I would like to introduce our ETHStaker group, and then we will hop right in. Today, let's see, we have Buddha. Buddha works with Bitfly, so he is associated with beaconcha.in. You want to say hi, Buddha?
Yeah, hi guys. And yeah, you probably forgot the terrible miners.
I'm not going to poke that. If you just poke it all day long, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put it in the past. Buddha
no,
is well, I'm encouraging him to be in recovery, and Ben is sipping his wine as Buddha brings up. We have Nolan, who you might know as Lamboshi. He's the brains of the crew. Well, some of the brains. We have a lot of brains here. Yeah. Michael, or Unvetica.eth, who does our DevOps stuff. Also, I have regarded Michael as my emotional support human, which is a fun way to regard him. I do want to send a shout out to Colfax. Colfax is not necessarily part of the ETHStaker core team, but he does a lot with us. So he's very much an ETHStaker, and we're glad to have you with us. And finally, Patricio Worthalter is in charge of the POAP program, and I saved him for last because he will talk just a moment about how you can get a POAP for this call.
Hey everyone, yes, I'm Patricio, and because we have big plans for these POAPs, like giving you access to great things because you are a loyal ETHStaker community call attendee, instead of giving the POAPs to everyone in the call like you used to use, like we used to do, I'm going to deliver them to people who has video on or to people I know. So if I don't know you or you are not active, show yourself on Discord, prove that you are a human. We want you to be a happy member. We want you to collect POAPs. We just want to discourage people farming them and getting multiple tokens if they are only one person. With that, enjoy the call.
Great. Thanks. And we will talk a couple more times throughout the call about claiming POAPs. Some calls, that's the only reason we show up, but I know this one will be, well, they're all pretty interesting. Some other people I want to send a quick shout out to. Terrence from Prismatic is here. And it's okay, you don't have to unmic. I just want to say hello, that we're glad to have you. And someone who's been really helpful to ETHStaker with distributing our Genesis POAPs is KTLXV. And we are glad to have you, and we appreciate your support of ETHStaker. So let's rock on. Ben and Adrian develop the Teku beacon chain validator client for ETH2. Would you all like to begin by giving us a brief introduction? Ben, will you go first for us?
Yeah, sure. So I am product owner for Teku, for what it's worth. That's my day job, my title, as it were. You might also know me from What's New in ETH2, which I write every couple of weeks. You can find it at eth2.news. And I've been hanging around Ethereum for about 5 years now. So come across many of you at one time or another.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, the What's New in ETH2 might be, it's one of those things like, you get a lot of newsletters, and a lot of them you just kind of like, kind of wave off or mark as read. But yours is one of those that I drop everything every time I see it. And looked through it. So it is, I think I've probably called it the most valuable piece of regular content in Ethereum 2 news. So hopefully we'll get to talking more about that today. Adrian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Adrian. I'm one of the developers on Teku. Been working on Teku for, I don't know, must be coming up towards a year now, 8 months or so. Before that, I was a developer on Besu. Still pay a little bit of attention there, but don't have a lot of time with ETH2 rocking along. Yeah, pretty much in Ethereum because I like this low-level technology more than anything. So the higher up the levels you go, the less I know. But I like it down here in the dungeons, making the protocol work.
Cool.
You know, Adrian's having fun because it's been a year and a half since he started work on Teku. Time flies, right?
Wow. I had not realized that.
You know, time dilation in the Ethereum space is like one of the most real concepts ever. Like it's some things seem like they've been weeks that have been years, and other things seem like they've been years that have been weeks. It is the most interesting thing. Before I shut up for a minute and let the team get into some of these questions, Ben, something I didn't know that I didn't understand until just now. You described yourself as product owner, but I know that there's a deep affiliation with Consensus. What is the link there?
Yeah, so I joined Consensus like 3.5 years ago, originally to work on enterprise stuff. I very quickly deemed that quite boring. And my passion was for public chain things. And at that time, Consensus wasn't really doing any protocol level work in Ethereum for various historical reasons, some bad blood with the Ethereum Foundation and things like that. But things were warming up and we were getting into doing protocol level stuff. And I wanted to make that my mission. So I set out kind of on a solo journey to work on whatever was next, the next generation of Ethereum. It wasn't ETH2 at that point. It was like staking, running contracts on ETH1 to manage validators and stuff like that. But it soon developed into what we know as ETH2. So I think I first met Terence back in Taipei, I think in early 2018. And it kind of grew from there. I'm going to have to close the chat box. I can't concentrate on anything with that.
Yeah, that's. I end up like speaker view only. Like I don't.
Yeah, stop letting people in.
And so over time, that was we built an R&D function around Ethereum 2, working on all sorts of interesting topics, and then we decided we wanted to build a client. So I moved over into the sort of product team. Well, we built that in R&D, so we had people like Johnny Ray and Joe DeLong and Stephen Schroeder were working on that, and Akila Raju as well. And then about a year and a half ago, we transitioned it over to the product team. Adrian came on board, and our sort of, it's a kind of 80-20 rule, right? It's easy to make something which is functional and a prototype, but make it product quality is actually 80% of the work. And that's what we've been doing for the last little while. And that's it. So I don't write a lot of code. They won't let me write too much code, but I try and set the direction and oversee things and gather requirements from customers and, just keep in touch with the wider business and community.
Okay, so it's funny how little of this, like in my mind, I think I know a lot about you, and then we start talking and I'm like, I don't know any of this. Would you consider yourself the bridge between research and implementation? Is that what role you serve?
Yeah, so product owner, product manager, whatever you call it. You're kind of at the intersection of three things. You got the people doing the development work, so the techies, and you need to speak their language and kind of understand what they do. You have the business, which is represented in the kind of company's priorities and what they want to do and what's the kind of commercial model, if any, and so on and so on. And you got the customers, of course, the users. And sometimes you get to interact with them directly, which is great. I can do that now. In my old job, I was always interacting with customers via salespeople, which was just horrible. So this is definitely an improvement. But yeah, so product manager sits at the center of a web in a way, and just tries to keep things aligned on several axes.
Well, I think you're perfect for the role, because I love to see you popping in the ETHStaker Reddit and helping solve things that you just add that unique perspective that you don't come across as a product. You come across as a very engaged and willing helper, and I love that attitude. So thanks for that. I am going to shut my mouth for a minute and let my friends kind of work down these questions.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Do you want to go, Buddha? I'll go. Can you guys tell us about, earlier on in your careers, what's your background, maybe some education if you have it, what you used to do for work?
I'm sure they have some education.
I'm pretty sure too.
Yeah, I mean, education, I did a Bachelor of Information Technology with Griffith Uni here in Brisbane, majored in computer science and artificial intelligence, but with quite a lot of software engineering in there. I've actually had, if you ignore, a few little jobs straight after uni, I've actually had 3 jobs in the last 20 years, including this one. So I started out actually as a Visual Basic developer, building an ActiveX control for in-browser HTML editing before there was DHTML. So back in the Netscape 4 kind of days. They very quickly discovered my Visual Basic was awful, and I started working on the Java applet. And I spent nearly 10 years doing that, worked my way up to CTO there. And they've then moved into JavaScript. So if you use WordPress, that editor in there is now the same company I used to work for. It started in a different place. So a lot of web content management, that kind of thing, working in the enterprise space. We sold a lot through IBM and places like that, which is really quite interesting to see big companies trying to manage creating that much content and websites with thousands of pages and so on, and getting the average user using it. The whole point was to kind of decentralize content creation, I guess. I've never put it that way before, but it's been interesting to engage with lots of users there. And then I spent about 8 years with a company called LMAX doing foreign currency exchange. So they built and ran a low latency exchange in Java. They basically realized that they spun out from Betfair actually, and realized that during something like the World Cup, Betfair was doing more trades in the London Stock Exchange by an order of magnitude, and maybe foreign currency wasn't that difficult to get into. Maybe instead of just betting, they could have this spin-off that went into finance. So I've seen a lot of fun stuff there, and that got me into kind of this world. So when we start talking cryptocurrency, they've started moving into there and some trading as well. And just really interesting, the low-level stuff, lots of Java, the amount of stuff you can do with Java and the speed at which you can do it really surprises a lot of people. I just want to get that in a few times this call. Java's not slow. And then Consensus actually hired a couple of people that I worked with previously back in that first job, and they were, if they're going to hire good quality people like that, it seemed like a company I should check out. And it's kind of been a wild ride ever since, bouncing around a few teams here at Consensus and then getting into the ETH2 stuff. I just love the technology, and that's what keeps me coming back every day.
So you're in Australia, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious because Australia seems to me to be one of the, on one side, like one of the hotbeds of ETH development. But on the other side, people, like when I hear about stakers from Australia, they're like, oh, well, our connections are terrible. We have latency. And so how would you characterize the Australian ETH community?
This is such an American question.
What do you want from me, Patricio? I can't be. My flag is right there.
I think it varies a lot.
If you can visit a single country in the world, let it be Australia.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's too American. I can characterize the American Ethereum scene, and you could probably characterize the Argentinian Ethereum scene. Why? I mean, I'm just curious to know how he sees it there.
It has sounded as you do guys have blockchain developers. How is that? But yeah,
Well,
talk about it. I'm curious.
That's not how I intended it.
Yeah. I mean, we ship packets in the pocket of a kangaroo, but it gets there eventually. I think it varies a lot. You know, Australia's a big country, and so there's kind of different worlds in between Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane. Sydney is a lot bigger in technology to Brisbane, but funnily enough, Consensus has more people here in Brisbane than anywhere else, I think. Maybe Sydney, but certainly in the protocol level. We've got quite a big team here of researchers and developers. And you get those little hubs that kind of build up. It's pretty exciting in terms of the stuff that's going on. There's been a few projects, I think the Australian Stock Exchange and some places like that, where it is starting to get traction with government and with some of the bigger companies. So it's not a complete backwater. Whether your internet is good enough for staking is very hit and miss here. There's lots of people with really good internet here. I'm very fortunate that I got a bit of the NBN that works well. And there's lots of people that just complain a lot and do have a lot of dropouts and a lot of problems. And the further you get out from the cities, the worse it gets, obviously.
In my defense, Patricio, I didn't imagine the backwoods aspect. I imagined it as a thriving community, and I wonder how it looks from there. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that you see, and I think this probably applies right across kind of the APAC time zones, is that everything else happens overnight. So if you ever watch the 2 core calls or developer calls, I'm never there because it's midnight. Yeah. And you know, this is 6 a.m. This is really quite civilized for me. It's one of the better meeting times I get in my week.
The Sigma Prime team always makes it.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. I mean, that's a big effort. I think they're also more night people than morning people for me. But you do see that there are long distances. It's hard to get to a lot of the conferences and things like that. But there's still a lot happening here, particularly through Asia. In APAC, there's a lot of blockchain going on there, and it really is picking up in Australia as well.
How do you guys manage the communication? So if you are awake, Ben goes to bed. So how do you do internal communication?
Yeah, lots of async stuff between Ben and I a lot of the time, but we get little bits of overlap. So it's one of those things in the modern world, you're very flexible about the hours you work. So even if I knock off relatively early in the afternoon because I've been up early, I'll still be on messages late at night. So Ben can, I mean, Ben's waking up something like 6 p.m. my time. It's not too bad. So after dinner, once a week we have a call in the evening. It's about 8 p.m. my time, and those kind of things. Mostly, though, it's just a bit of back and forth on Slack, and it kind of all works out. You can do a lot of async stuff fairly well.
It's basically mandatory to be async. I mean, the full team currently active on Teku. Adrian and Paul in Brisbane. We got Meredith and Jem in East Coast time, US. And we got Anton in St. Petersburg, Russia, and myself. And there is no time, which is good for everybody. So we use Slack a lot.
Are you happy with the size of your team, or would you hire someone else if you found the right person?
Well, funny you should ask. We don't tend to hire directly into the team. So Pegasus, we're part of a bigger organization, which is Pegasus. Pegasus is, 60 people or so, protocol engineering group in Consensus. So we tend to hire protocol engineers into Pegasus, and then people find roles within the teams. We may be looking to add one to the Teku team. So if anyone has strong Java chops and is interested in working on it, then let us know, and we will see how things go.
Speaking of Java, that is probably the perfect time to ask or to have you all tell us about the Teku client. What sets it apart? What is unique about it? That's all my question.
Well, let me start, then Adrian can put me right. So, the Java thing comes out of the Pegasus and consensus, the background. So the initial ethos was around enterprise Ethereum, and felt, we didn't want to scare customers, so we didn't want to program in some obscure language they'd never heard of. There are more Java devs in the world than any other language. And so it's just easy conversation. Licensing as well was an issue, so we chose a very liberal license, Apache 2, and so on. So, those are the people we had available when we started writing Teku, and it was just a natural choice for us. And as Adrian says, it doesn't hamper us in any way. I mean, Java is quick, it's efficient. There are vast libraries available for everything under the sun. So, I kind of feel for the Status team, that the Nimbus team, because they've basically had to write everything from scratch. I mean, all the core libraries and everything, it's a lot of work. Whereas, our biggest problem is, which one do we choose? So that is, as for language choice, we took a decision early on. I felt it was strategic for the clients to sort of differentiate themselves in terms of target market. And at one level, all the clients are the same, right? They all do the same job, they run on similar hardware, they have similar kind of spec requirements, and they all have to talk to each other, and they're basically by definition interchangeable. But at another level, I felt it was good to try to differentiate our target market, to give us a sort of a focus. And, we're not all competing for the same users all the time, which is, just a bun fight. So given consensus and Pegasus and where we were and the kind of background of our devs and our sort of DNA, we decided to go after the institutional staking market. And, we can come to my kind of personal preferences later, which are slightly at odds with that direction. But, that made sense as a product emphasis for Teku. So that is when we imagine our target clients, when we're thinking of features, when we're talking to users and prioritizing user stories, it is the institutional staker who's in mind. So we're developing features which make their lives easier. We're not so much focusing on people who are running 1 or 2 validators at home, though I am quite happily on Teku and it's terrific. But we're looking at people who are running thousands of validators and trying to do things which make their operations better. So that's the kind of high level description of where we're going.
Can I strike while the iron is hot real quick? You said that you take odds with being identified as an institutional client. Just because I will forget to follow up on that, and I'm curious about it.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I have a personal passion, and I have a kind of professional kind of role as well. My personal passion is, why I've kind of thrown in my lot with this community. I want people to be staking at home. I love that decentralization mantra. I'm fully bought into it. And, in a sense, having my client be the client of choice for institutional stakers kind of goes against that a little bit. And I always have to think twice when I say it. But, these people will be involved. They need to run something. I'd rather it were our client than something else. So, we'll do our level best to make the best client for institutional stakers we can. Although, outside office hours, my passion is for doing what you guys do.
That is that's a really great line, and I hope that maybe later in the call, if we have time left, maybe it's one of the questions. I would love to talk more about how we see decentralization of the network and how it's evolving in the first few months. But I don't want to hijack, so let's continue to move on. And I would love to hopefully get back to, I'm going to add it to the notes, to get back to decentralization later on. Nolan or Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, actually, real quick. So, Ben, in your editorial and your latest blog post, you mentioned many changes to the Ethereum roadmap. So can you kind of explain and give a brief overview of the original roadmap and how that contrasts with today's roadmap?
Yeah, this is kind of favorite topic of mine. I just love the way that Ethereum is adaptable, that things evolve. We're not You know, I used to work on like 5-year Gantt charts, and everything was nailed down from the beginning, and we'd have this massive project plan. And now we do a lot more exploration, and I love that. So we a couple of years ago, we laid out a very neat phase 0, phase 1, phase 2 linear roadmap where we deliver the beacon chain, we deliver data shards, we deliver execution environments on top of that, and then we have this kind of merge of ETH1 into ETH2 as an execution environment. But yeah, as we've gone along, new things have come up, and new priorities have emerged. Roll-ups have come on the scene since then and look like they can solve some of our problems without necessarily having to do kind of hard stuff in protocol. We can sort of move that into layer 2. So things have evolved, and the current roadmap is roll-up centric. So there are 3 things we need to parallelize to scale. There's data input, which is blocks. There is state, which we need to hold, and there is processing of the data. So if we want to scale, we need to parallelize all 3 things. The original plan was to do that. Phase 1 was to parallelize the data input, the blocks, and phase 2 was to parallelize the processing and the state. We've moved away from that. We've said we're only going to parallelize in protocol the data processing, the shards, and we're going to make the handling the state and the execution the problem of roll-ups. So they're going to handle the parallelization of state and execution. So that makes our job a lot simpler as protocol developers. And we've taken advantage of that to bring forward the merge of ETH1 and ETH2. So we can do that very quickly if we need to. And so we got this executable beacon chain concept that was first published by our colleague Mikhail in November last year, so quite recent. And that's independent now of sharding. We don't have to do sharding first, or we don't have to do the merge first. We can pick and choose. And yeah, I mean, I was seeing a lot of comments on Twitter and elsewhere, just people saying, you know, these gas fees are killing us. When ETH2, hurry up, guys, get a move on. And actually, ETH2 as currently envisaged does not solve the gas problem. Roll-up solve the gas problem, and that's not what we're working on.
So if we aren't scaling the layer 1, is there any concerns that entering and exiting roll-ups will still be massively expensive for people?
That's outside my area of expertise, to be honest.
Okay.
And,
Fair enough.
I think mostly people won't be entering and exiting very often, and there will be protocols to do cross roll-up transfers without hitting layer 1. So it's only when you need to have a dispute or sort out an issue that you have to appeal to layer 1, and hopefully that will be rare. But that's my current take on things.
So I want to unpack that a little bit.
Looking
Actually,
at Connect.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
I just want to unpack that just a little bit in the sense that, so the takeaway here I'm getting is that we're moving from more of a roll-up centric architecture over sort of prioritizing sharding as a scaling solution to Ethereum 2. Can we really kind of like ELI5 this and for the newcomers to the scene, and why that is different, and why sort of the pivot to roll-up centric versus the sharding priority?
Let me try out an analogy that I've been working on. It needs a bit of polishing, but so EVM is an engine and currently is underpowered. So our initial solution to that was to have many EVMs. So we originally had in mind 1,024 engines, and that was how we were going to get power. But that came with all sorts of problems about how these engines work together. So what we're doing now with roll-ups is roll-ups are a way to turbocharge your engine. So they take the input data, they compress it, so like the fuel air mix, and they ram it into the engine and give it more power. And they also kind of deal with the state problem, but that doesn't really fit in the analogy, so we'll ignore that. And the great thing about, so you can do that on Ethereum 1, and you can get some, 100x or whatever, depending on your application and your roll-up type, speed up more power out of your engine, your single engine, by sticking a roll-up in front of it, ramming the data into it, the fuel air mix, and you get more power out. Then with ETH2, with the sharded data, you compound that gain because you've now got 64 fuel lines now. So the shards are like extra fuel lines coming in. And so your roll-up turbocharger has 64 times as much, or actually quite a lot more than 64 times as much fuel that it can now force into the engine, and then you get this enormously powerful engine. But there's only one of them. We're not like doing 1,000 engines anymore.
So maybe this is helpful for you as an analogy. On the early days of the internet, countries connected between themselves with dedicated optic fiber lines. And when they needed more capacity, they dug more trenches and they put more pipes and optic fibers. And during the dot-com bubble, they were laying pipes with hundreds of different fibers, spending huge amount of capital. And a couple of years later, and it was quite groundbreaking, pretty much like roll-ups, they discovered that they could do wavelength division multiplexing. So they kept using the same pipes and having hundreds of magnitudes, many orders of magnitude more capacity. And it's up to these days that we are barely using the lines that were dug 20 years ago. So maybe that's an easier analogy to put together.
Yeah, I like it. I'll think about that.
So, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the current purpose of the shards. Does it mean something like Matic, which has become Polygon, or Optimism, that each of those might have its own shard that it checks data into, or does it matter? Does it work that way?
I think they can watch multiple shards and take data input from multiple shards, and it will depend on the application. And honestly speaking, these are unsolved questions. So as I noted in my editorial, this is a rapidly evolving space. It's going to be chaotic for a while as these layer 2 solutions are built out. And it's kind of one of the disadvantages of the new direction is it's no longer neat and ordered and phase 0, phase 1, phase 2. It's now this kind of big mess of layer 2 stuff that kind of needs to shake out. But it will quickly. Yeah. And then we'll know a lot more about what the future looks like.
Well, it's funny because I tend to regard myself as the leader of the ETHStaker community, and I feel like I should understand a lot of these things. And then there are like these really basic questions, and I'm like, well, I ought to know that. And then I build up the courage to ask, and you're like, well, that really hasn't been solved yet. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's why I don't know. So it's good to know that, to recognize that it's so complex that while it's still being worked out, there aren't a lot of answers, but it's also the kind of thing in 2 years when it's done, it will be completely obvious. Like, aha, it was right there all the time. We just didn't see it then. So thanks for that perspective.
I think the other thing worth noting in that is that while roll-ups are kind of undefined, they're actually working, at least in part. The phase 2 that we originally envisioned for Ethereum, there was some really great research into it, and it's not completely undefined, but there's a lot of problems still to be solved in it, and a lot of work to be done. I think it's a lot less defined and a lot less known than where roll-ups are, which is what makes them a good choice to go there now. And if we needed to, then we can still scale layer 1 with that phase 2 plan in the future, potentially, once we work out how.
Is it wise for us to repeat the line that ETH2 isn't the scaling solution, that it's rollups? Is that something? Because it is a understanding I'm beginning to solidify. Is it the right message to push out to everyone?
Yeah, so it's not quite that simple. So ETH2 does scale rollups. So rollups give n scalability, and ETH2 gives n times 64 or whatever. So they do compound, but in the short term, then rollups are the way forward for scalability.
I think of ETH2 a lot like the ETH1.x moniker, which started, I think it was Prague, where there was some talk of we're not getting to ETH2 fast enough, the ETH1 chain's not going to survive. And they came up with 3 or 4 task force to look at this technology. And I can't remember what all of them were, but I don't think any of them shipped. Some might have gotten through, But ETH 1.x has just kind of rolled on anyway. And every time we change anything on what's currently called the ETH 1 chain, we call it ETH 1.x. It's just improving Ethereum. And I think ETH 2 is like that. People keep asking why we aren't rolling this out as part of ETH 2 and why are we doing it now? Or why are we, ETH 2 is just the future of Ethereum at this point. The roadmap has changed so many times that you can't point to it and be one specific thing, and it will keep changing. And that's really cool. So I basically say, yeah, roll-ups are a part of ETH 2 now.
I think the one thing we can probably agree on is that we will transition from ETH 1 to ETH 2 at the point when the merge, like the block when the merge activates, would be the moment that we say we are now in ETH 2. Is that a fair assumption?
We kind of keep talking about the ETH 2 rollout after that anyway. Just we'll stop talking about ETH 1.
Yeah, the people are quite down on ETH2. Vitalik says he tries never to use the ETH2 expression. Danny is moving away from it. As the purveyor of what's new in ETH2, I'm a huge advocate of the term. But yeah, I mean, that's the point where we turn off proof of stake, which is a proof of work rather, which is a huge milestone. It's been part of the Ethereum story since almost day one, and I think is worthy to say that point at which we do the merge, we're now running on proof of stake, not proof of work. That's a massive milestone. It is worth a name, and Serenity is the old name, but ETH2 will do.
I'm still comfortable using ETH2 in regard to the chain. I think that makes perfect sense. In regard to the coin layer, as in the value layer, it is all Ethereum. But when you're discussing chains, what chain are you on? I feel like it does make some sense then to describe ETH1 or ETH2 because they are such different entities.
Yeah, true. Beacon chain, we could call it, whatever. But I'm content with ETH2. I don't feel like we need to be revisionist about this. It's fine.
I think now that we talked. Go ahead.
If you guys were starting Teku from scratch, is there anything you'd change?
Yes, I think anytime you're working in a code base, there are things that you don't like, and you wouldn't do that again. But ultimately, in terms of what an ETH2 client needs to look like, I think we need to go through 3 or 4 more hard forks. And really get an idea, and probably the merge, and it's in 2 years' time that you can start to look back and go, oh, that's what a client needs to look like. And in fact, the ETH1 clients are just doing that now. They're all refactoring madly the low-level data storage because the way they've stored it up till now isn't efficient enough. And there's actually this whole new way that took Alexei 3 or 4 years to try and prove out and convince people of. And I think that kind of approach is going to apply for ETH2 clients as well. So at the moment, we're all talking, attestation inclusion rates. By the time you merge in ETH1, are they going to matter as much? Probably, because you do get paid for them. That'll probably still be a fair bit of money tied to that. But your block import rate and the way you work with that ETH1 client, how you handle latency of having them on different machines, because the scale is going to be quite different in terms of the resource load. Can you outsource that to someone like Infura and have a lot of latency between your node and the ETH1 node? All of those kind of considerations are going to be so new and so much more of a challenge that we just don't know what it's got to look like in terms of how that client is structured. So, then it kind of comes back to the relatively boring answer of, well, I'd like a client that does what it needs to do now, that's well tested and is easy to change, because it's going to have to change. And I think that's pretty much what every client team is working towards now, is just making it easy to change because they know the tsunami of changes is coming.
Okay, I think I can continue now. I actually wanted to say, we were talking about proof of work, so I thought I'd jump in. Adrian was writing a post about the half-truths of ETHStaker, about stakers, and that with proof of stake that you pay the minimum to secure the chain, whereas with proof of work you pay slightly more. and I wanted to know what your thoughts about proof of work are.
I think the key thing is that the policy Ethereum has had since day one is to pay the minimum possible for the required security. So I think that's true both of proof of work and proof of stake. And that's why proof of stake has this built-in reduction in rewards as the number of validators go up. Because the more validators we have, the more secure our chain is, the less we need you. So if you drop off, it's not as big a deal. Whereas if we have few validators, we want to pay more to try and incentivize you to join. And that's exactly the same mechanism you see with the hash rate and difficulty kind of balance. The miners earn less as more miners come on. To me, what do I think of proof of work? It's a pretty expensive kind of endeavor to burn a lot of processing time for not a lot of good, really, when you can do better without it. I think a lot of people actually get caught up in hating on miners in that, and particularly as stakers, I think we've got to really watch that, because, and this is why I kind of wrote that post, was stakers are the new miners. Everything that applies to miners today, in terms of you're a service provider and you're paid for your job, and the rules might change at any time, that all applies to stakers as well. And that doesn't mean that the world is out to get you, or that, people often phrase it as miners aren't part of the community, and I hate that phrase. I think that's so wrong. I think miners are part of the community, as are stakers. And I think one of the big advantages of proof of stake versus proof of work is that when you exit proof of stake, you get your money back. So you make an investment and it sits there, and as long as you don't get yourself slashed or perform really badly, your money is still there at the end. So if you find that the rules changed or that the rate of return has dropped because there's enough validators, it's really easy to exit. And it's not a personal slight. It's not a huge loss on your investment. You're not kind of, I spent $1 million on mining rigs and now I just burnt them. They're worthless. It's a really much better alignment of incentives of, I'm happy to take that rate of pay. Now I'm not. Tomorrow I am again. You can kind of jump in and out so much more easily and without the fuss. A lot of this started because I've been paying attention to the 1559 mining channel, which is it's a social information.
Yeah, I think until ETH2 doesn't prove itself, proof of work will be the choice. But until once we move over and ETH2 proves itself, I believe that other chains will follow to proof of stake. But until then, we have to wait, I guess.
Yeah, seeing a lot of chains starting with proof of stake for a variety of reasons. Doing it at the scale of Ethereum is really, really hard. That's the unique thing about ETH2 is the scale of decentralization that we can do with proof of stake. Bitcoin will never change from proof of work. It just is. What other new chains do, I think, will be a variety of things. They're like kind of trading off the decentralization with throughput or different things like that. And it's good to have those choices.
Yeah, just for my hey Peneth, there are two things I like about proof of work. It's super simple. It's got properties that are easy to analyze, and having been involved in implementing proof of stake over the last couple of years, I think I'd tell you it's not simple. And it's much easier to bootstrap, which is quite a subtle point, but you can participate in the protocol without having any of the coin of the protocol. You can make coins without having coins originally. And so for the original blockchains, that made a lot of sense, right? Bootstrapping it. Proof of stake, not quite so easy to bootstrap, but we're not there now. We're in a different place now, and we've all got magic internet money, so it's we can don't have to worry about that aspect of it. Yeah, I mean, one of the very early things I read, so I said I got into kind of Ethereum world about 5 years ago. I read very early on a draft of a book. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's written by some consultants, and it was about blockchain technology. And one of the very late chapters in the book just mentioned in passing this idea of proof of stake, where instead of spending your money on a bunch of graphics cards, you put it into the protocol. And I just thought this was brilliant. I mean, it just grabbed me. It was one of those oh, wow, this is incredible moments, a flash of insight. And I thought, yeah, we should do that. so when I learned later that Ethereum was planning to do that, it really drove my interest in Ethereum, and has kind of like been a goal ever since.
It's probably
was PureCoin the first? Something like PureCoin was one of the first proof of stake systems that just seemed really, at the time, it seemed really hokey. Because it was the first. But I'm sure, we look at the transition now. It made so much sense to begin with proof of work, where, like you said, anyone can run hardware to get into the ecosystem. And it made sense where, 4 or 5 years after that, when the people who were invested in the technology, that's kind of like an equal opportunity airdrop, in a way, in a way of a manner of speaking, and that those people could then progress to the next level. So I think that progressive model is really a cool way to look at the growth of Ethereum over time. Just my 2 cents.
This is probably a good segue, since we're sort of dancing around this topic anyway. But one of the platforms that I manage is the Ethereum Study Master site. And the focus of that platform is to help educate newcomers to the Ethereum ecosystem. So I'm wondering if we can, in the spirit of that, educate newcomers to the Ethereum scene and sort of dissect and break down one of the hot topics within the industry. And that, at least in the moment, one of them is EIP 1559. So I'm wondering if either Ben or Adrian want to sort of break down what that is in a very general sense and why that's such a polarizing topic within the ecosystem.
I need more wine before I'm going to tackle that. Over to you, mate.
59 is a change to the way that gas fees work, essentially. It's a change to the auction mechanism. The way we currently price gas fees, it's actually incredibly hard to know how much you should pay. It's kind of like bidding on a house. It's the analogy that I think was from the Tim Roughgarden paper. And you kind of put in your bid and you want to make sure it's high enough that you actually get in, because if you're not, you miss out, and it's a real problem. So and if you get it, that's the price you pay. Whatever you bid is what you pay. So you're really incentivized to put it down low, but you kind of can't, because you've got to make sure it's high enough all the time. That doesn't work great. So 1559 changes that so that the protocol sets a base fee, and that's the amount that it will cost you to get in. It changes slower. It's about 12% per block at most. So you can kind of predict it. But more importantly, you can set a cap on the amount you want to pay. So you can actually say, this transaction is worth it to me, even if I have to pay 100 ETH to get in. But you don't have to pay 100 ETH unless that's where the price actually is up to. So if the real price is 1 nano ETH, you pay 1 nano ETH, and the rest of the money you get back. Much easier pricing, much easier for users to actually understand. And it's been hard for people to wrestle with this, because there's a lot of economic analysis in it. But that's what it boils down to, is you can say maximum with confidence that you'll only pay what's actually required. Why is it controversial? Well, it turns out that the way to make things work and the incentives line up, the base fee that you pay gets burnt instead of being paid to miners. Now, when 1559 started work, transaction fees were a very, very small component of miner income. They were really dominated by the block reward, which is, for security reasons, what you want from a blockchain. You don't want it to be transaction fee dominated. In the meantime, over the last couple of years, transaction fees have blown up, and it's now a huge part of miners' income. And, we're giving these people a pay cut, basically. People don't like taking a pay cut. It's not hard to understand the outrage. At the same time, there's a lot of confusion in that because of the difference between what we pay miners in total and what any individual miner will wind up making. So at the moment, it's good because hash rate's trying to catch up with the price of ETH and with the price of transactions. So individual miners are actually making a decent amount at the moment, I think. But if you take a sudden drop in that, you get the effect, a sudden drop in the total amount we pay to miners, which 1559 will cause. You get the opposite effect. In that hash rate will be really high, so it's hard to find a block. and you're earning a small percent of the total rewards, and they'll take time to come back down. So individual miners will actually wind up a lot worse until that hash rate comes back down. And then you just get all the politics and drama of we hate miners, we love miners, all that stuff mixed in, and you get this huge blow up. Ultimately, though, I think it's a lot less controversial than it seems. Like, everyone seems on board with the idea of it. It is just a matter of working through with miners of how to adjust that hash rate so that we still wind up with a good distribution of miners and that they're not too badly caught out. Some of which will just be the fact that it's still at least 6 months away from shipping. So, 5 months now probably, but yeah, the notice of when people notice things to when it actually ships is always a lot longer than you think.
And I know your wife is staking. Can you do a PSA about what redundancies and failovers she has set up?
Yeah, she's more into the kind of DeFi degen stuff herself, so she delegates the staking side of things to me. So I manage her stake. I really just want to know
what client she's using.
I manage her stake on her behalf, and I did recommend Teku. So we're running Teku here. I've got a little dedicated box. It's just an i5 6-core processor, 16 gig RAM, and it's running super smoothly, running Teku just on a home ADSL connection. My bandwidth isn't super, but yeah, it's terrifically reliable. I checked today, it's been up a month. I haven't upgraded recently, and it's just been running a month, no issues. I've got a UPS, which helps occasional. Yeah, we get 5 or 10 minute power outages every now and again. Had a couple of internet outages, which you lose some reward, but you quickly make it up again. It's been great. Yeah, really good experience.
Well, one of the big concerns that we have from people who are interested in mining, and this is one of the things I see every day on ETHStaker, on Reddit ETHStaker, is, I have 4,000 Ether and I want to stake, but I can't, or maybe it's 32. I have 32 Ether and I want to stake, but I can't or I won't because I don't want to get slashed, because it seems like everybody gets slashed. Can you help put that in perspective for people who may not really get the context?
Yeah, I can say a word, and Adrian will have you as well. And the number of individuals who've had their stake slashed is tiny. I forget how many slashings we've had altogether, but the vast majority have been a couple of staking services who screwed up, and there have been a handful, maybe 6 individuals who've had their stake slashed. And slashing isn't as bad as it sounds. I mean, they've lost about 0.6 of an ETH. Their stake is locked up until we do the merge, which is unfortunate at this current time, but they haven't lost their whole stake or anywhere near it, just a small fraction. So it's not a disaster. And you just have to take some very basic precautions. The clients have all got built-in slashing protection now, and there's an interchange format, which is an EIP, and I think we're all supporting now. I think Prism's just put that in. So if you change client, as long as you port that data over, you can be sure that the client you're bringing up is not going to do anything slashable. So just taking some fairly basic precautions about making sure you never run 2 validators managing the same key at the same time, and it ain't rocket science. So if you follow that basic maxim, you will not get slashed. It's just not going to happen. Do you want to add?
While we're talking about slashing, what happens if people don't or forget to update their ETH1 nodes at the Berlin hard fork? Can they get slashed for not updating?
No. And actually, there's an analysis I did on, you can read on the ETHSpecs repo, that currently only 3% of rewards come from proposing blocks. So if you're not connected to an ETH1 node, the only thing you can't do is propose blocks. And only 3% of the rewards come from proposing blocks. And it turns out that actually, most of the time, even if you're not connected to an ETH1 node, you can actually propose blocks. So I forget the exact number, but basically, if you never have an ETH1 node connected, you might expect to lose about 0.4% of your total rewards, maybe $10 a year, which makes it kind of questionable about why anyone would bother running an ETH1 node. And I don't. I connect to Infura. Which is bad. You know, I'm a bad person, but you know, it's just not worth it.
Yep. You're a home staker. That makes you a contributor to the network. That's, you know, one of the things I spend all my time, like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be ideal, but be the best you can. And could you help? So I'm glad that we talked about what it takes to get slashed. Can you, from your perspective, talk about, and this is great because you run or you develop the client that is used by industry for staking most commonly. Can you talk about the difference in slashing for someone who might be staking with an exchange or a pool versus the slashing that happens if I'm a home staker and I have, you know, one node running? Where's the counter intuition in there, and why would you suggest that it's better to stake with a large pool or with a single validator at home?
Ben's in conflict with himself there, so I'll take that. So the advantage of staking from home is that slashing penalties scale up as more people get slashed at the same time. So if you have just you get slashed, you're one validator, the penalty is really small. If you have 1,000 validators all being slashed at the same time, maybe even more than that, it starts to really ramp up, because the network is basically trying to determine whether you've accidentally done something stupid or whether you're actually attacking the network, and it's trying to penalize you accordingly. Being slashed, the bigger the penalty. And if you're with a staking setup and they stuff up, there's a good chance, as we saw with one, that you'll get a whole bunch of slashings at once, and then the penalty is increased. So actually, staking from home, much as we love Teku and staking providers are awesome, and support them and Teku, staking from home is actually a really, really good option if you keep your setup simple and don't worry about the downtime. Right. So as Ben said, if you have some downtime, it's small, you can make it up. A really simple setup that just sits there and runs, it's not going to correlate with other failures all the time. Your chances or your risk, even if you do get slashed, is quite low. And the same thing for if finalization stops, you're not going to be contributing to that. You'll be one of the good people helping it to keep going and things like that. Plus the general thing of aiding decentralization. Where I think staking pools are really useful is especially for people who don't have 32 ETH. It's a great way to onboard. And for people who running even a simple node is too much for them. And I think they're both good markets to be chasing. Running a node is not as hard as you think. So it is worth, if you've managed to find yourself into this community, there's a very good chance you are technical enough to run a node. So it is worth a look, but I don't think there's any shame in using a staking service. It's like you said, you'd be as good as you can be, and you're still contributing to the network, because you can always take your stake and move it, particularly once withdrawals are there. It's a bit of a funny time at the moment, but longer term, it's like mining pools. You pick a staking pool that is operating in a way that you are happy with and that you believe is contributing to the network well.
So I keep hearing developers say, if we need to do the merge, we can do the merge, which sounds exciting to me. Do either of you want to Justin Drake up a prediction for me?
A prediction on when the merge is going to happen? No. I don't make predictions about the future anymore. I've been burnt on that. Turns out I've mostly been right, but I get a lot of grief for it. I'd love to talk about the merge though, because Teku is very much involved in this. So part of Pegasus is our R&D division, which is thriving, and Mikhail, formerly of the Harmony ETH2 team, is leading an R&D team within Pegasus, and he's used Teku and he's working with the Ethereum Foundation with Guillaume over there, who's got a fork of Geth, and they have made a prototype executable beacon chain. So this is ETH1 running on ETH2, it works. So it is Teku and Geth, basically versions of talking to each other and running proof of stake ETH1. And this is very cool. And actually, there is a blockchain out there which Fabian Vogelsteller, who invented ERC20, defined that standard. He has put together his own blockchain, which is called Luxo. He's just finished his reversible ICO. They are running this. They are planning to run this in production. This, which is interesting. This Teku Geth combo. So they'll be running a version of the executable beacon chain for their blockchain. So yeah, good things are happening. And the slow part about this is the governance, right? The technical side is actually pretty straightforward. Mikhail's demonstrated. It works. The slow part is the governance, and we need to. That is, softly. A lot of value depends on this going correctly, and people need to be completely convinced that it's safe and it's going to work and it's not going to be disruptive. So the next N months are going to be about that. And a big step forward was taken yesterday when there was a good long discussion on the ETH1 all core devs call about what the merge involved. And that's, the teams, the sides, ETH2, ETH1 are getting much closer together now.
Do you think that there is some amount of ETH required to be staked so we can consider it as safe? So because right now there is like 3 million ETH staked. That's like if you were to merge right now, it would secure a 200 billion network. How much ETH do we need to have staked in order to consider it as safe?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think nobody really knows the answer. It's not half of all ETH and plus half of all DeFi, because that just doesn't make any sense. But in the ballpark figure, which makes the protocol work fully, is 250,000 validators, whatever that is. I can't work that out. 4 million ETH. No. Yes, something like that. 8 million ETH. Yeah, that's right. And Vitalik's actually proposed putting a cap on the number of validators that are active at any one time of 500,000. So that's somewhere between 7 and 14% of all Ether staked. And currently we're at what, 3% or something. So we don't need a lot more, I think, to be in the right ballpark.
I'd like to begin wrapping up the call. And as we do, there are 4 things that I'd like us to talk about, and I'm going to assign those really quickly. Patricia, if I can get you to talk about the POAP one more time. Michael, if I can get you to talk about the installation workshop that we had talked about. Nolan, if you will talk about the upcoming call for the Teku ETH1 merge client. And then after we wrap up, if anyone who's on the Zoom wants to remain on the Zoom after we cut off YouTube, we will do a Bright ID group scan. So Patricia, do you want to go ahead?
Yep. I think anyone who wanted their POAP already got it. So in case you don't know what it is, POAP is a proof of attendance protocol. Every person that is part of an event, and an event can be many things, it's entitled to get a non-fungible token that works as a proof that you've been part of that event. We've been running this thing for 2 years now. It's been going well. There are many POAPs. The ETHStaker community has been a testing ground for new POAP functionality, and we plan on running experiments here. So if you didn't get your POAP, chime out somehow, either here or Discord or somewhere else. If you did get your POAP, stay tuned, because we are working hard for making them more valuable, for making them useful for different things. So don't miss them. If we are building the consensus layer of the future, the consensus network, the distributed system our grandchildren will use, it would be nice to have a proof that you've been part of the early days of it. So I see that only one person didn't get it, Tom Regenbogen. I'm going to reach out to him, and if someone else has any question, feel free to reach out. And please, Michael, tell us more about the workshop that we are doing in March.
All right, thanks, Patricio.
I really see POAP as one of those public goods kind of things. And I was actually pinging Patricio privately about this the other day, like when airdrop. But and he said no airdrop anytime soon, don't worry. But it is one of those public good kind of things, like Pull Together, like Uniswap, like Tornado Cash. Like they are not in it to profit or win. They're in it to provide a public good. And so there's a lot of potential in just getting interested and involved in POAP. And if you don't know about it yet, find us anywhere on ETHStaker because we love to talk about it. So thank you, Patricio.
And then upcoming within the ETHStaker community, for those of you already familiar with the community, we've hosted one of these last year, which is the Validator Workshop course. We hold a live session and we start from bare metal and spin up a working functional mainnet validator. So that's what we did last time. With sort of the next iteration of this, what we're going to do is we followed Samare ESAT's guides and tutorials last time. What we're going to do this time is create sort of an MVP, just the bare minimum what you need to set up and spin something up. And then those are going to be our two tracks. So we're going to follow Samare's guides and then the MVP guide. And we're going to go through different scenarios, getting used to some of the more advanced feature sets of the deposit CLI, running through different scenarios, what happens if you want to recreate keys, running multiple validators or keys on validator, working through some of the minutia in different scenarios. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're just interested in diving in and learning more about validators, if you're new to the scene, I highly recommend you check us out. That will be Saturday, March 6th. So that's 2 weeks from today exactly. Next week, Wednesday, which is February 24th, we will make a formal post on the ETHStaker website at ethstaker.cc outlining the specific date and times, the link and how to access, and any questions that you may have to set up. We'll make sure that you're taken care of. So that's my spiel on the Validator Workshop. I hope to see everyone there.
Great. And our next event, we're going to have the previously mentioned Mikhail and Guillaume on to talk about the Teku plus Geth client and all about the merge. I don't think we've nailed down an exact date for it yet, but probably early-ish next month.
I thought we had a date. Do we not?
Maybe we do.
No, I don't think we do.
Okay, my misunderstanding.
We think that call is going to be quite significant because the merge hasn't been yet explained to the people on the ground. So stay tuned to it. It might be, it's likely going to be the first opportunity to really understand what's going on from the people building it.
And so we have confirmed it. We just haven't established the time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And one more thing. Buddha, if you want to take this, do you want to tell about the hard fork naming? Is that something we can talk about publicly, Patricio?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So yeah, Buddha.
Yeah, Buddha,
So
do you
yeah,
want to tell us?
yeah, sure. On GitHub, there is an issue where you can post names for the upcoming hard fork. You can be creative, and we will choose. I think we will choose the top 5, and then post them on POAP vote. And people who own a POAP or have been in the community and have a POAP can vote on their favorite one. I'm just not sure if we are going to pick the top 5 or not.
I think it's going to be more the researchers and client devs.
And it's not about picking the name of the next hard fork, but about picking the naming convention for all the protocol upgrades that are coming to ETH2. So there are some guidelines, and they are all on the ETH2 GitHub repo. It's an issue by iSpare, one of the ETH2 researchers.
It has become a bit of a joke, and I have contributed to the joke and just having some fun. But if you scale back or zoom out, you'll realize that this naming convention will probably last for many years. So if you can make a great proposal, and if yours is selected, then you will have that claim to fame for many years to come. So aside from the haha joke, it may be worth submitting some quality responses there.
And we'll put that link in the video description to the recording of this as well, for those of you not familiar with where that GitHub location is.
Yeah, and if you don't have any idea, almost all of us, the ETHStaker people, have made our own proposals. So maybe you want to support any of them or mine.
So Ben and Adrian, we are delighted to have you guys today. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with us?
No, I don't know that I do, but it's been wonderful to be here. I think it is a real joy to see the ETHStaker community and the amount of help that you're giving people. It's such a wonderful community to have. Blockchain communities aren't always known for being so friendly and supportive, so do keep that up. It is a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally echo that, and love the education side. I'm an alumnus of the first round of the I forget what it's called now, but the
Study Master. You're not an alumnus. What are you? Say what you are, Ben.
Yeah, the valedictorian. Is that what you call it? My kind of final thought is, notwithstanding the Teku branding as, primarily aimed at institutional stakers, it is, I speak from personal experience, super client to run at home. I would love more people in this community to be running Teku. Running a minority client is good for the network, it's good for you. And you can find us on our Discord. Thankfully, it's usually busy during my night, so Adrian carries most of the load of answering questions and stuff. But Adrian and I hang out there, and some of the other devs as well. So that's on the Consensus Discord, and we've got a little community there.
Is it actually a minority client?
It's hard to tell exactly what the proportions are, but I have looks like about 7% of the nodes are Teku from a crawl that was done recently, but I know that at least 14% of graffiti is Teku. So and so we're a minimum of 14% of validators, and it looks like most Teku nodes are running twice as many validators as average. So that kind of indicates it tends to be larger operations using it. But yeah, so if 14% is a minority, it's a minority.
When you say there was a crawl, it's like someone had a bot poking and fingerprinting every node in the network.
Yeah. So Leo, who's been around for a while from Barcelona Supercomputer Center, has written a bot that crawls the network, and it seems to be fairly reliable. But that counts nodes, not validators, and that's a different thing because you can run many validators per node.
That's cool to know.
I would love to get a better link to that because I only see the screenshot. I would love to know the home for it. I still haven't found it.
Yeah, it's in What's New in ETH2, dude. A couple of weeks ago.
I mean, I saw that. But does that have?
Yeah, the source code is linked and the repos. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we should run the bot in the ETHStaker infrastructure for neutrality.
That's a good idea, and we could update the data regularly from that rather than just snapshotting. Yeah, that's actually an awesome idea. As we close, I would like to let everyone know that Ben and Adrian are fantastic contributors to the staking ecosystem. They develop the Teku client is wonderful. It runs very smoothly, and there's this idea that because they develop for institutional clients, that it might be harder to get support, but if you've ever reached out to them, I can guarantee you that their support is nearly instantaneous and top-notch. So definitely one of the top tier clients. I would encourage anyone to try to stake, but if you decided to start staking today, Teku is a perfect client to begin with. So thanks everyone for your time. I'm really glad you all made it. Thank you, Adrian, for waking up for us. and take care. If you're still on the call, stick around after we finish recording, and we'll do that Bright ID link up.
Bye, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.